Our scripture reading this morning is 1 Corinthians 13. If you're following along in your pew Bibles, it's in the New Testament on page 175. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have a prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love.
There are a number of stories about this movie and things that almost happened or didn't happen that would have prevented it from being the cultural touchstone that it has become over the last 75 years. One of them was that Dorothy was not originally supposed to be played by Judy Garland. The first person to be asked, who, thank goodness, said no, and no disrespect to Miss Temple Black, who is an amazing human being and has served her country and humanity in many ways over her many years. But Shirley Temple was supposed to be Dorothy. Can you imagine? But probably the most... Oh, also the Tin Man. I can't remember the name of the actor. Very famous guy. What? No, Buddy Ebsen was supposed to play him. And they did the makeup, which turned out to be toxic, and he got so sick that he couldn't play it, and so the guy who ended up playing was brought in instead. And can you imagine that part being played by anybody but him? Buddy recovered from his poisoning from his metallic makeup. But the most amazing one, and I always give thanks when God saves us from the bean counters, was Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which over 75 years has continued to be the single most famous and beloved and remembered movie song of all time. 4 different times, the bean counters tried to take that song out of the movie, arguing that she's 14 years old. And no 14-year-old has any way of being able to sing a song with that much gravitas in it. No 14-year-old has ever been afraid or suffered enough to desire a place somewhere over the rainbow. They wanted all the songs to be like the later songs, which I love, that are silly, unlikely lyrics. Deserve you, worthy of you, The songs that come later are silly and unlikely, and they're wonderful, but they wanted the whole movie to be silly. All the music to be lighthearted. And they just didn't think that song fit. Well, for one thing, that song is what gives this movie its depth. It's what sets you up to take it seriously. And only if you take it seriously, along with enjoying the whimsy of it, will you see the depth of the themes that Frank L. Baum put into his original story, in which somehow the bean counters of Hollywood failed to filter out again. Frank was a Christian, active in his church, and he consciously tried to weave Christian themes and ideas into his text. And somehow, the bean counters, in spite of trying 4 different times, failed to take this song out of it. Because the very idea that a 14-year-old is too young to be afraid, that a 14-year-old is too young to be confused, that a 14-year-old is too young to be alienated from her family, from her community, and is too young to desire a better reality, a different reality, to yearn for a world where there is no pain and no confusion and no fear. The idea that any human being is too young or too old to experience that reality is just absurd. I'm pretty sure that 14-year-olds have not changed that dramatically since 1938, or since 1738, or since 38. I'm pretty sure that the sense of fear, because Dorothy is afraid. She's afraid that she is going to lose something that is precious to her, something that is a part of her community. She's afraid she's going to lose her dog, Toto. She is afraid that her family will not be able to protect her and that she will lose her childhood sense of safety. She's afraid that there will never be a world where she is fully understood. We all have those fears. We are all dealing with the fear that we might lose something that is precious to us. We all live with the fear that we don't know enough and that the future will present us with things we won't be able to deal with. We are all afraid that we won't be loved sufficiently, or that we won't be up to the calling of loving others who are sometimes so unlovable. We all struggle with the fear that we won't have the courage, that at that moment when it matters most, that we will duck our responsibilities and that we will be thought of badly by the people whose good opinion matters most to us. We are all Dorothy. We're afraid of loss. We long to come home to that place where everything makes sense. We long to come home to that place where we are fully loved and are capable of fully loving. We long to come to that place where we have the courage to do the things that we are called to do. It's called the human condition. The way that Frank designs his story and the way that Warner Brothers producers and directors pull the parts of that story together, she goes through a calamity to a land far away, a wonderful land, a land of color and awesomeness and difference, a mind-boggling place. And she discovers that at first she doesn't know enough to survive in this place either, even though she's gone over the rainbow. She discovers that she's alone, and doesn't know who she can trust or who can love her, or whether there will be people that she can love. She discovers that this is a frightening place with the appearance of the Wicked Witch of the West. This is a place she's not sure she has the courage or the resources to face. But she begins a journey. And it's the journey home. How do I get back to Kansas, she asks. And Glinda says, I don't know, but surely the Wizard of Oz will know. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the journey that takes you home. And as she goes along this journey, she discovers three friends. First, the Scarecrow, who doesn't know anything. And he is so sure that he doesn't have a brain, that he doesn't have the intellectual capacity to be able to make his way in the world, and he feels like he is less than. And she says, I'm going to the wizard to help me find a way home. And the Scarecrow, and she says, perhaps the wizard can give you a brain. And then they encounter the Tin Man, who was constructed out of tin by a tinsmith who forgot to put a heart in him. Maybe the wizard can find you compassion and commitment and passion and love. Maybe he can find you what you need in order to love and be loved. And they continue the journey, and they discover a lion who pretends to be courageous but turns out very quickly to be frightened. A lion who is sure that he doesn't have the courage, that he doesn't have the resources, that he doesn't have the wherewithal to face life, and he's ashamed. And his shame drives him to be both silly and mean sometimes, as our shame drives us. And if we're paying attention, if we grew up watching this movie, we've seen it more than once, we begin to realize that these three friends are not just also separate characters, but they're all symbolic of Dorothy's inner struggle, her inner turmoil, her inner alienation from the world. She doesn't have what she needs. She's afraid she will lose what's precious to her. She's afraid that people will think badly of her. She lives in fear of shame. And so do they. And the interesting things that develops through all this, and if you're paying attention, if you're loving these characters, you realize that the Scarecrow is the one who always has an idea. When push comes to shove and danger suddenly appears, it's the Scarecrow who has an idea how to make it right. When they pick apples and the apple trees surprisingly come to life and begin to object to the fact that they want to eat apples, it's the Scarecrow who has the idea to make the apple trees so mad that they will pick their own apples and throw them at them. You want apples? Let me show you how to find apples. The one who is so afraid that he doesn't have what's up here to do is the very one who, when push comes to shove, has the idea. And there's no character in the movie, in the story, who has more love than the Tin Man. So much so that everything makes him cry. And when he cries, he rusts. And has to be oiled to be able to move. The one who thought he did not have what he needs is the one who always ties everyone and everything together with his compassion and his passion and his caring. And finally, even though it's very hard for him, even though he is often frightened, even though if he were by himself, he would run in the other direction, which the wizard also wisely points out might be wisdom as well as fearfulness, because some things ought to just be run away from. But because he's not alone, because he's with people that he loves and needs, he finds resources within himself to find his way to doing the right thing. And when you understand what courage really is, I've had the opportunity in my career to speak with a number of veterans, never having been one myself, people who served in combat, relatives who served as a navigator in a B-24 during the Second World War. I've never met a veteran who served in combat who said he was not afraid. But they had courage. Because, and this is another thing that you often hear from veterans who have been in combat, I could not run. I could not do my duty because of the person who was next to me. Because they were depending upon me. Because other people needed me. Courage is the thing that wells up within us to do the thing we are afraid to do in order to protect the people that we love. I remember being like an older teenager, maybe 17 or 18, and I must have been older than that, in my 20s. I can remember staying at my brother's house, which is way out in the country, and it's totally dark out, and all kinds of animal noises. And I can remember being in that house by myself and being afraid of the dark, even though I was in the 20s. It was like, this is creepy. And there were no curtains on this house because nobody could see the house, much less see in the house. And so there I was in this lighted house with this dark meadow and woods out there thinking, there are bad guys out there. They can see everything I'm doing, and I can't see that. But I also remember the night when I was left to babysit my nephew. And because I was the one in charge, because I was the one to protect, I didn't have that experience. And I remember thinking that. Last night, this was creepy to me. Tonight, it isn't, because I am in charge, because I am the protector. Courage arises out of our relationships with other people and their need for us. In the course of this journey home, Dorothy comes to understand, and the three companions come to understand, that the very thing they didn't have is the thing they have in spades. I think as we make our journey through life searching for that home which we all long for and desire, we discover the same thing. The very things that we think we do not have, we discover within ourselves that in fact we do have them. And it is the challenges of the things that we encounter along the yellow brick road that remind us and that show us and demonstrate to us that there is more in us and to us than we ever could have imagined. Baum lifts up three essential human characteristics. He lifts up courage and love and intelligence as the three critical pieces that we have to discover within ourselves. And each of those characters discover not only that they have courage, they have intelligence, they have compassion and love, but they also discover the importance of thinking that they don't have it. Because it's just as important for us to understand what we don't know as it is to know stuff. It's just as important for us to see and look honestly and see within us and wonder, do we have the compassion that we need to be the people we are called to be in the midst of the community? It's essential to know that we have those capacities. It's just as essential to wonder if we have those capacities. That the two things they seem diametrically opposed, but they dance together. They dance together. Do I know enough? I know a lot. Do I care enough? I care a lot. Do people care about me? They do care about me. It's the discovery of that. It's the constant exploration and the wondering, am I enough? And the discovery, I am enough. The dynamism of that keeps it as a living, growing part of our human growth. And it makes the energy that we need to continue our journey home, to look for the things in us that we feel are lacking. So it's not just that they discover they have these things. It's that they are involved in this process of wondering if they have these things. And in the process, discovering not once, but over and over and over again, that yes, in fact, they do. They are. Dorothy goes along this road wondering if she will ever get home, wondering where home is, wondering how she will get home, wondering who it is that can help her to get home. And what she doesn't realize, but the people who are watching the film or reading the book or considering these aspects in their own life, is that over and over again, she discovers that she is home. She finds herself plopped down in the midst of Munchkin land, and she becomes part of that community. And they send her on her way, on her journey, on her quest. She discovers these three strange characters, and they become family. They become home. She finds her way to Oz, and she discovers that she's already home. And when Glinda comes back to help her leave and go, she's sad because she's already home. And the thing that she discovers is that home is with us wherever we go. It's not a place. It's who we are. Paul the Apostle writes this wonderful, encouraging message to the church in Corinth. A church which is in the midst of an identity crisis. A church that is in the midst of a lot of conflict between various classes of people and various groups who believe different things, who have different spiritual experiences. Some of them speak in tongues, others of them don't. Some of them are rich and some of them are poor. Some of them believe that it's okay to do these things that other people do, and others who believe very strongly that it is not okay to do those things that other people do. It's a community that is alive in the power and spirit of Jesus Christ, but it's also a community that is at odds with one another across a number of different divides and chasms. And in his response to this community in conflict and turmoil, he writes this amazing treatise on the nature of love. Love isn't anxious. It's not fearful. It's not proud. It doesn't insist on its own way. It's patient. It's kind. Kindness, a very underrated characteristic, especially in our day. The nature of love is that it gives of itself, much as Christ gave of himself. He says all these things you're fighting about, prophecies and speaking in tongues, all those things are going to pass away when we finally find our way home. He says we only see things partially now. We see things as though we were children. We understand it all in black and white. But when we find our way home, we're going to see that things are much clearer. He says there are three really critical things: faith and hope and love. Faith. What is faith? I had preached an unintentional series of sermons on faith not long ago. What is faith? It's belief wrapped in courage. The courage to follow, the courage to trust. Courage to trust in yourself and the courage to trust in God. Hope. What is hope? It's not a silly kind of optimism that thinks anything is possible. Hope is realistic. It knows what the challenges are. It's smart. It's realistic. But it's also realistic enough to know that there is so much that it doesn't know. Hope is hard-nosed. It's practical. But it knows what it doesn't know. And it leans towards a future that it cannot possibly imagine, but trusts will be there. And love. Love is the thing Paul says, it's not only one of the characteristics, it's not just one of the dancers in the dance, though it is that. It's the dance teacher. Love is the thing that allows people to dance together and to learn from each other and to draw strength from one another. Love is the thing that allows intelligence to don courage, which allows courage to be smart, that allows brains to dance with heart and passion to dance with courage. Faith, hope, and love. Courage, intelligence, and love. These three abide. But the greatest of them, says Paul, and Frank Elmont, the greatest of them is love. Because it is the love that we have for one another that draws us together and allows us to draw courage and ideas from one another. It's love that allows us to like ourselves enough to see what it is that we know and to be able to draw on the strength to do the things that we have to do. Faith, hope, and love, these three, the greatest of them is love. Thanks be to God.